I told the police I found the recordings in my grandmother's attic, but that wasn't exactly true. The truth is that the tapes found me. It started 3 weeks after the funeral, when I went to clear out her house in Burnham Wood, that old, overgrown suburb where every lawn has a chain-link fence and every basement smells like wet concrete. Margaret Hollister was 91 when she died, a retired schoolteacher who never married, never had children, and apparently never threw anything away. The attic was a museum of the mundane, Christmas ornaments from the 1950s, stacks of Life magazines, a sewing machine that still had thread in the needle. I was up there on a Sunday afternoon, sorting through boxes labeled Kitchen 1972, when I found a milk crate full of cassette tapes. There were maybe 40 of them, each one labeled with a date and a name in my grandmother's careful cursive. June 14, 1985, Paul. November 3, 1987, Diane. March 22, 1990, Emily. The handwriting was the same as the recipe cards she used to send me at college, the same looped letters and dotted I's. I assumed they were old sermons or radio programs. She was a devout listener of public radio. But when I slid the first tape into the old boombox I'd found in her bedroom, the voice that came out wasn't a preacher's. It was a woman's voice, thin and reedy, speaking in the halting cadence of someone who'd been crying for a very long time. "My name is Sarah Holt," the voice said. "I'm 43 years old. I live at 1423 Maple Drive in Burnham Wood. Today is June 14, 1985. This is my confession." I almost turned it off. I'm not the kind of person who listens to other people's private pain. But then she said something that made my hand stop, hovering over the stop button. "Margaret Hollister is the only person who believes me," the voice said. "And she's the only person who can help me prove what happened in the basement of the old Burnham Wood Community Church." That was my grandmother's name. My grandmother who taught Sunday school at that church for 40 years. My grandmother who never missed a potluck or a prayer meeting. My grandmother who baked me cookies and tucked handwritten notes into my lunchbox until I was 15 years old. I listened to the rest of the tape. Then I listened to the next one, and the one after that. By the time I finished the first 10 tapes, it was 3 in the morning. My hands were shaking. The attic smelled like dust and old paper, and somewhere outside a dog was barking in a pattern that sounded almost like a word. I sat there on the floor, surrounded by boxes, and I realized that I didn't know my grandmother at all. The tapes were confessions, every single one of them. Different voices, different stories, but the same basic structure. A person describing something terrible they'd witnessed or done, something that happened in or near the Burnham Wood Community Church. A woman who'd lost her daughter in the parking lot in 1978 and never found her. A man who'd helped dig a foundation for a new annex in 1982 and found bones beneath the soil. A teenager who'd snuck into the church basement during a youth retreat and heard something moving in the walls. And every single tape ended the same way. "Margaret Hollister is the only person who believes me. Margaret Hollister told me to record this. Margaret Hollister said the tape would be safe. Margaret Hollister, my grandmother, the woman who taught me how to bake bread and sew buttons and pray before bed. The woman who, according to the tapes, had been collecting confessions for decades, taking statements from people who had nowhere else to go, recording their stories, filing them away in milk crates in her attic like a one-woman archive of the town's hidden wounds. I went through every tape that night. 37 in total, spanning from 1978 to 2008. The last one was dated October 12, 2008, and the voice belonged to a man named Kevin Morrison, who said he'd been the janitor at the church for 30 years. "I've been waiting for someone to ask," Kevin said. His voice was old, cracked like dry leaves. "I've been waiting for someone to notice, but nobody ever does. They just keep coming." He didn't say what they kept coming to. He didn't say where. But he gave a date, October 15, 2008, and an address, 1423 Maple Drive, my grandmother's house. I checked the calendar on my phone. October 15 was 3 days away. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my grandmother's living room, surrounded by her Afghans and her porcelain figurines, and I listened to the tapes again. This time I took notes. Names, dates, locations. The same locations kept appearing. The church basement, the parking lot, the woods behind the church, and my grandmother's house. The next morning, I went to the church. Burnham Wood Community Church is a white clapboard building at the end of a dead-end road, surrounded by oak trees that must have been planted in the 1800s. The parking lot was empty on a Monday morning. The front door was unlocked. I walked inside and stood in the nave, where the light came through stained glass windows in colors that looked like bruises, deep purple, black-veined red. I found the basement stairs behind the kitchen. The door was painted a different shade of white than the wall around it, like it had been added later. I remember thinking that the door was latchless. There was no handle. I pressed my palm against it, and it gave way. The stairs went down farther than they should have. I counted 20 steps, then 30, then 40. The air grew cool and damp, and the walls changed from drywall to stone. At the bottom was a hallway, and at the end of the hallway was a door that didn't match the rest of the architecture, a modern steel door with a keypad lock. The keypad had a number written on it in permanent marker. 1423, my grandmother's address. I typed the number without thinking. The lock clicked open. Beyond the door was a room that didn't exist on any blueprint of the church. It was circular, maybe 40 feet across, with a concrete floor stained dark in the center. The walls were lined with shelves, and on the shelves were more tapes, hundreds of them, thousands, and photographs. The photographs were pinned to corkboards, organized by year going back to the 1970s. They were all the same type of image, a person standing in a field or a parking lot or a living room, their face partially obscured by shadows or motion blur. Some of them were young. Some were old, some looked like they were smiling, some looked like they were screaming. I found a photograph of my grandmother. It was dated 1992. She was standing in the backyard of her house, wearing the same floral dress she wore in my childhood memories. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, half hidden in the tree line, was a figure. A man, maybe, or something that used to be a man. It was tall, bonelessly tall, with arms that hung past its knees and a face that was all mouth. A black, open oval where features should have been. The tape from Kevin, the janitor, hadn't mentioned tall figures. But the woman who lost her daughter in 1978 had mentioned something she saw in the parking lot, something that moved like a person but wasn't a person. The man who dug the foundation in 1982 had described a shape he found in the dirt, a shape that shouldn't have been there. I took the photograph down. I put it in my pocket. I left the room and drove back to my grandmother's house and called the police. They came. They listened. They went to the church. They found the basement. They found the room. They called me back 3 hours later and told me the room was empty. Empty, I said. There were shelves full of tapes. There were photographs. I took one. There's nothing there, ma'am, the officer said. His voice was flat, professional, the voice of someone who'd been trained to deliver bad news without emotion. We found a storage closet, old Christmas decorations, nothing else. I didn't argue. I thanked him and hung up. Then I took the photograph out of my pocket and looked at it. It was different. The figure behind my grandmother was still there, but now my grandmother was looking at it. Directly at it, her face turned over her shoulder, her mouth open in a shape I recognized from the other photographs. A shape like the beginning of a scream. And in the corner of the photograph, newly visible, there was a date stamp I hadn't noticed before. Not 1992. October 15, 2008. The date Kevin the janitor had given me. The date he said they would come. The date that, according to my phone, was now tomorrow. I called Kevin Morrison's number. It was disconnected. I called the church. No answer. I called my grandmother's house, just to hear the voicemail message I'd been too afraid to delete, and I listened to her voice. Warm, familiar, the voice of a woman who made cookies and secrets in equal measure. Hello, you've reached Margaret. I can't come to the phone right now. Please leave a message after the tone. I left a message. Grandma, I said, what happened on October 15? I didn't get an answer that night. But the next morning, October 15, I woke up to find a package on my grandmother's front porch. It was wrapped in brown paper, tied with kitchen twine, and addressed to me in my grandmother's handwriting. Inside was a tape I hadn't seen before. It was dated October 15, 2024 today. I put it in the boombox. I pressed play. And my grandmother's voice came through, steady and calm, the voice of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you in person, she said. But you're the only one who can finish what I started. You need to go back to the church. You need to go to the basement. And this time you need to take a photograph of your own. I'm at her kitchen table now. The tape is still playing. Outside, the sun is setting over Burnham Wood and the oak trees are throwing shadows that go on forever. I'm holding the camera she left in the package. I'm looking at the photograph in my pocket, The one of my grandmother, the one that changed, the one that now shows a date that hasn't happened yet. I'm going to the church. I'm taking the photograph, and I'm starting to understand why nobody who made a tape ever came back for it.